welcome to this workshop, or actually what I'm calling a community conversation about the energy of 2025, and actually specifically about change. Normally, I do a webinar every year. I used to do it with a friend of mine. She would talk about the energy of the year based on the ancient Chinese systems. She's not around to do that anymore. The last few years I've done it myself, but this year I just felt like it's time to do things differently, because it's so clear that whatever the energy is, whatever's happening, whatever the patterns are, change is the predominant theme of everything at the moment. It's happening so quickly. And I feel that it's a very, very important thing for us to talk about with some depth and connection and real engagement, to have a quality conversation around change. So I decided that we would do this as a conversation. I'm not going to do it as like me speaking or anything like that. We're really going to talk with each other. And we're going to see what comes out of it. So that's the fundamental format. I will guide the conversation a bit. I will also participate in it if I have things that I feel I want to share around this. But I really want anybody who feels like you have something to share to be able to participate. So the more we're all participating, the better. Okay. The one thing I would say is this is what I see as a public event. So I will be putting up the video on YouTube afterwards. If you don't want to be seen or you don't want to be heard, then please don't speak. If you don't mind being heard, but you don't want to be seen, then at any time when you speak, then make sure your video is off. I'm fine with that. You can have your video on most of the time. The only person who shows is the person actually speaking. I won't be using gallery view, okay? If you want to participate, but you don't want to be heard, then you just need to do it in the chat. I will keep looking at the chat all the way through. But yes, I will be sharing this. So I just want to make that really clear. Is there anything else I need to say before we start? I don't think so. Just to say really welcome. And let's just get a little bit of a show of, where you are. Can you write in the chat where you are, just so we get a bit of a feeling of who's here? Portugal, Leeds, Israel, Cornwall, Finland, Munich. Oh, this is going fast. Singapore, Portugal, Sweden, Germany, Straya. I don't even know where oh, Straya, is that where I live? Larissa is not in a good place, huh? Sunshine Coast near me, Tasmania. Okay, Manchester, Netherlands, Buckinghamshire, southwest of France, brilliant. Scotland, Austria, amazing. That's fantastic. Estonia, brilliant. Okay, there are many more. I haven't mentioned all of them, but that's wonderful. Really, really good mix of people here. So I've got 3 questions that I've planned for us to explore. There may be other things that will come out of that, but this will be our kind of guiding arc. And I'll tell you what the 3 questions are before we start. The first is, what is change? The second is, how can we respond to change? And the third is, how do we influence change? And so I'm going to simply encourage us to go deep on this topic, okay? We all know what change is at a superficial level, but I'm going to encourage us to start by asking ourselves, really go deep and ask ourselves, what really is change? Everyone's talking about everything's changing so fast. It's in the media, it's in everyday conversations, it's everywhere. What is that actually? What's happening? What does it mean when we say things are changing? Because actually things are changing all the time. It's never not true, but we're saying it a lot these days, and a lot of people are saying it a lot. So let's start with this first question about what is change. And the way we're going to do this is, if you have something to say, then the easiest way to do it is if you could raise your hand. There should be at the bottom of your screen a raise hand button. Sometimes it's hidden and it's in the react. You click on react and you can find it there. If you raise your hand, you come to the top of my list of participants. So it's really easy for me to see the order you've raised your hand in. If that doesn't work, you can unmute yourself or just send me a message in the chat that you want to speak. Sometimes it just doesn't work for some reason. Okay, so we're going to dive straight in. It might be a little bit clumsy to begin with as we kind of get started, but that's part of the territory, really, isn't it? So what is change? When you think about change or you feel change, especially when you feel change, what's actually happening there? Change, Sissy is saying change is a shift from mind focus to heart focus. So that is a type of change. Yeah, so that's, we can call that a change of focus, or it can produce a change of state there. And that's obviously a change that we can influence. But what actually is change itself? Okay, I'm going to encourage you to speak. Don't just write, unless you're very deliberately writing. Just put your hand up, Patricia. You happen to be on my screen, so you can just unmute yourself and speak. Patricia.
Hello, good morning. Very grateful to see you, Sarah, and everyone else. I'm very emotional now, talking. But for me, change right now, which is really happening for me in the professional area, I think is stretching and stretching my habits, being more adaptable and creative with the things I do, not things that are new to me, and being able to move on from my comfort, I will say, not always comfort zone, but the things that I'm used to do and how I am used to do them, no?
So you've actually very important words here, Patricia. If you listen carefully to what she's saying, she used the word stretching. So often when there's change, we feel stretched. She's talked about moving on. She talked about comfort zone and having to go beyond her comfort zone. These are all, and there were a whole lot of other words. There were about 6 or 7 different words or phrases you used there, which I think speak very strongly to change. So thank you for getting us started like that. I'm going to read a few things that are in the chat as well. An expansion of horizons or consciousness from Karen. Maya, for me, change is movement. Yes, there's always movement in change. Fiona, a restlessness inside me. So when there's change, we often feel, if we feel that things are not changing, even though they're changing, because everything's always changing, but when we don't feel it so much, things feel more static or steady. But this restlessness, these different feelings we start to get. Christine, I feel a change around time, that it's going faster. I thought that was about age, but my kids are also noticing it. Interesting. Louise, a catalyst. Katie, change can be scary, but also wonderful. It's something that normally doesn't happen. Interesting. Evelyn, opening new space, curiosity comes up, even not knowing where we're all heading. I think that's very much in the air at the moment, not knowing where we're heading. Change is the structure reorganizing itself. Inika, beautiful description, the structure reorganizing itself. Change is the light bulb moment of seeing something in a new way, leading to a new way of thinking and taking action. It's a physical sensation in the body too. That's Paula. And Francis, moving from one state to another, like a caterpillar to a butterfly. Catherine, opening to new potentials. Let's see what Nick has to say.
Yeah, for me, change is newness. It's something that hasn't been here before.
Okay. So what's, if we say the word change, because at one level, Nick, we could say every moment is new.
Yeah, but something that hasn't been here before, something that we haven't encountered before, that existence that is new to existence. Like there's,
So it's, you're talking about evolution in a way, aren't you?
yeah, and it's pretty rapid nowadays, you know.
Okay, so it would be very interesting because it really is true that every moment we haven't seen before. And of course, there's continuity at the same time. You know, there's continuity from moment to moment. It's really interesting to see, like, to just really dive into this, this sense that you're having, that Nick's also touching into here. Martin.
So I feel like change is life. Life is change. It's always changing. And
Mhm.
that, as someone mentioned in the chat, I like the analogy of the caterpillar to the butterfly. It's like life has been continuously changing, but I feel like as humanity, we've just been becoming better caterpillars. And now we're going to a change where our whole reality, they talk about the imaginal cells that are inside the caterpillar, and that's like the seeds that's going to become the butterfly. But the caterpillar has no idea what a butterfly is. It doesn't know what flying is. It doesn't know those potentials. So the change seems so huge that we don't know where it is, but it's continuously coming. It's always been happening. I just feel like the change is like this evolutionary leap from caterpillar to butterfly, and we don't have a framework for that through caterpillar consciousness. So that's what's evolving, I feel. That's the change I see.
Can we be sure that that's the case? There's a book, there's a really fascinating book called Lizards Eat Butterflies. And it's specifically addressing that. It's by somebody called Dr. David Martin, and he's not crazy about the caterpillar and butterfly analogy, which was actually developed originally by a woman called Elizabeth Sartoris, I believe, who I know. She died recently, but she was a very amazing woman who came up with the whole concept of biomimicry. But we talk about this. Can we be sure? I think back to I wasn't alive in the late 1800s, but I know that there was a movement then where people thought, you know, that there was massive change happening. There was clearly in the 60s, also in the 80s, also around 2012, you know, that was the great change. And you know, can we be sure of this butterfly story? Are we really caterpillars turning into butterflies? I'm not doubting. I'm asking an open question here, because we often make assumptions around these things, and I don't know if it could be true and it could be not true.
Yeah, I feel it's like a symbolic thing rather than it's more a symbolic that it's a change into something that we can't, like you said, we can't know. Like the caterpillar doesn't know butterfly.
Do you know that the caterpillar doesn't know?
Oh yeah, no, I can only speak as this caterpillar that I've experienced glimpses of things that don't fit into the frame of reality that I've experienced up until now. So I can only speak from my own experience. Yeah, I can't speak for those little caterpillars. But from this one, yes, I can say that I have glimpsed things that don't fit with the reality that I'm currently experiencing, and I don't fully understand it. And I don't know that that's where we're going, but it has doors and windows have opened to something beyond that I can't really put words to.
And what's very interesting in that context, because I'm sure many people will resonate here, is because I understand also that sense of glimpsing things, and what do they become when they're grounded, you know, when they're actually happening here in this not only 3D world, we're clearly more than 3D, but you know, how does what we glimpse turn into something, and how does it turn into something in the context where we are now, where at the same time as we're having glimpses maybe of quite a radical change and a shift in consciousness, perhaps, that you might be thinking about as well, there is also a radical shift towards not only AI, but implanting machinery technology within human beings, which you know, it's almost the other extreme. It's almost the exact equivalent in a way. It's like there's the natural path and there's the unnatural path to massively expand our consciousness, we could say. So we're at a very interesting point, and that's going very quickly. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation, because I think we need to be extremely aware of what change means and how we manage ourselves in change, so that we don't go in a direction we don't want to. So thank you, Martin. Helen. Just unmute yourself, Helen. Maybe you're already trying to do that.
Sorry, my bandwidth's really low, and everything I try is like scaring the internet. So I've already been booted off the call once, and I miraculously came back.
And you've got some kind of black and white that I've never seen before, so that's a little miracle there.
Oh, mine black and white. I think, yeah, it's just poor lighting.
Your whole yeah. We'll let you speak while you can.
Yes. To me, the simple answer for change is growth. Growth is change. You just, you know, you can't.
Oh, you've gone silent.
Oh dear.
Oh, now we can hear you again. So I heard you say, we can't. You said change is growth. We can't, and then you went silent.
Yeah. When we grow, we change, and when it's done it again, hasn't it? Okay. It keeps giving me messages about my microphone. So yes, when we grow, we change, and growth is inevitable. It happens from when we arrive on this planet
all the way through.
Yeah, but you know, they're talking about the universe is growing too. That they're saying, you know, the research is showing that it's so dynamic that, you know, our universe is expanding as well. So to me, growth and change are synonymous. So that's my easy answer. And then my complicated answer, you just started talking about you know, the talk about the change in consciousness and the up-leveling of consciousness. And there's this person called Eugene Purigine who wrote a theory about chaos. And he says, and it's sort of similar to spiral dynamics, I think, that a system, when it's starting to fall apart, goes into massive chaos. And I think this is part of the change that we're seeing. And if it doesn't do that, it's like the caterpillar turning into the the butterfly as well. If it doesn't have enough energy in that falling apart, there's not the energy that's needed to bump us up to the next level. So I think
very interesting. When we come to the next section about how we respond to change, that's going to be very important, what you just talked about, isn't it?
So that's my contribution.
Thank you. And you got it. We got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Margot.
Hi, yes, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, change is a constant upgrade in like literally through our system, and but probably that's the next question. The way is, are we conscious about it, and how do we respond to it, and how do we feel into it?
Mm-hmm. So is there a difference, like, is when people are talking about change now, because what you're talking about is, again, like I started saying, change is happening all the time. There's this there's a constant evolution, constant upgrading of our system, but we do definitely experience periods where it's stronger or it feels stronger. So is change a feeling?
No, it feels, well, I don't think it is a reality of constant upgrading. And the question is, are we aware of it, yes or no? And maybe at times when changes are more visible in ourselves or around ourselves, maybe we think, oh no, there's change, but there is a constancy in the updating. And the question is, how do we embody it? Do we feel it? Do we work from it? are we it? Because maybe we are that change. We are the constant upgrading of all these levels of consciousness we are.
So what comes to me as I listen to you is what's happening. People often say to me, I'm stuck. And I don't actually believe in stuck. Anyone who's done courses with me will probably know that I'm not a big one when people say I'm stuck, because they're never stuck, actually. But what's happening when we think we're not experiencing change? That's another part of this question, because we often, many people in the world would say, nothing's changing in my life, for example. Or they would feel that their life is really boring or really stuck. In this context where we're saying everything's changing all the time, it's interesting to look at that comparison with change as well.
Well, and then it's from what standpoint are you looking at change?
Mm-hmm.
Are you like attuned inside and feel what's going on, or are you not aware at all of the constant upgrading which is happening? Well, that's quantum physics and spirituality as well. Or the most people are drawn outside and are looking there. So probably the question is, where's your consciousness? Where do you look in change? What is your standpoint?
You can see change outside and you can see change inside.
Yeah, and I think the more you can be in sync with this constant upgrading in yourself, you can just let the changes happening around you, which you cannot change anyway.
Well, and that's what we'll come to in our third section. Is
sorry,
how do we?
No,
be sorry, but where can we influence change, and how do we do that? I think is a really important topic, because we don't want to be just pushed around by life. We want to feel that, have the experience of having agency, of having power in life.
Well, some people want that, what you say, and I'm in that same team, but there are people who don't want to be the change.
No, but most people want to feel some power to change their own life. If some part of their life isn't working, they would like to be able to change it.
Or have people change it for them.
Yes, so they may not feel
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
those people are probably not in this conversation, so
who knows? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's go to Tone.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We could hear you from the beginning.
Oh, okay. To me, change is, I think, transmutation of the old. That is, to me, real change. But I know that, as you said, everything changes all the time. But if you're not conscious about the change, things will change into the same over and over again. If you know what I mean, that you're sort of manifesting the same thing over and over again if you're not conscious about what's happening inside and outside. So the transmutation for me is the real change that's happening.
This is quite interesting when we start to talk about manifestation, and clearly we're starting to move towards the next the later questions, because, well, I don't want to say anything here, actually. I think there are some very interesting questions hanging in between the questions here, around we're a little bit making the assumption that so change is happening, and it's whether I'm aware of it or not, whether I'm conscious of it or not. But what in all the change that's happening at the moment, I'm going to be aware of a tiny bit of it, and maybe I could be aware of this bit or of that bit. So there's a question in here somewhere that
I guess
actually
it's the bigger picture and then the smaller picture, maybe, of change. Like in my personal life, I can be conscious about my own personal life and things happening in my life that are changing and not changing. But in the bigger picture, like worldview, it's more difficult, I guess, to comprehend all the changes that are happening.
Well, maybe, or maybe the changes that are happening in you are kind of the same. Like, I'm not putting out the answers. I'm really raising the questions here.
Yeah.
The more I listen, the more I sense through some of the teaching that I do, it becomes clear that, what's happening inside me or inside you, what's happening in the universe, they're really the same thing.
Yeah, what's happening out there in the universe and the energy coming to Earth is obviously changing us all the time. As you said, we're changing all the time, but I'm thinking I agree with that. And then I also see what I said before, that you can change into the same thing over and over again. When you were talking about people who feel stuck, that's what's happening. You're changing into the same.
We all know how to do that, don't we?
Yeah.
People are quite good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Evelyn.
Hello, everybody. For me, change is always a flow. It is at certain points a culmination, like a mirror on what wants to expand or to change in a certain time or in a certain moment. And I always experience it as opening up a field of possibilities, personal change, and in the outer reality as well. And I feel like you always, there's a need for finding your standing point, your reality in all layers as far as it is possible. Where am I now? And what does this change unfold for me now, personally, and as well at the outer reality? Yeah.
Yes. And Petra.
A change for me is being confronted with situations I have to find a new reaction to, that the old is not applying anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are situations that I sense the change when the outer and the inner development is not applying anymore. When I'm developing in an environment that is developing and changing in the same rhythm, so I don't feel the change. I don't feel a resistance there or an adjustment. But when I have to adjust and look and search for a new reaction to a situation, that I would say it's a change I sense in my system. Something what's needed to react different.
Yep. And it's really clear we need these different rhythms of change. We couldn't live with everything having to be new in every second, even if technically it is. We need that sense of familiarity, as well as then sometimes it's faster. Sometimes it's a bigger change going on. I'm just looking at some of the texts here. Let's go to Sue. Just unmute yourself, Sue.
Yep, is that it? Yeah, hi. I totally agree, I think, with a lot of what's talking. And I think there's this real sense for me of, I almost feel there's two levels of change. I feel there's very much a personal level of change with the life changes, the challenges that allow me to have developed and grown and developed over life. I think what I feel for me has shifted at 64 odd now, is the change that I feel, and probably other people have mentioned it, is speeding up. But I think there's also this sense of change that is so much bigger and being put upon us, as you mentioned, AI, political decisions that are happening around the world, that I just feel have just come out of the blue, have become really big, that are really forcing us all to really think very clearly about what is the world we want. And for me, I think struggling to think as an individual, how do I start to engage with this? What's my opportunity to influence what I'm feeling concerned about? So I think for me, I feel there's personal level changes through life roles of mothers, workers, grandmothers, relationships that allow me to grow and develop and take on new challenges. But for me, I'm also feeling more increasingly concerned about the bigger political issues that is facing our world. And for me, that I think what brought me here tonight was, how do we not feel powerless about change that's happening on a bigger stage in the world right now? And how do we start to find our power to be part of changing something more for the positive? So I'm really keen to explore that more and dig deep.
Yeah, that's why we're having this conversation, really, because I see that people feel powerless in the face of rapid change. And I think that's very high risk for us as human beings, that we feel powerless at this time.
Yeah.
So I feel a great sense of just supporting people to find the natural true power that does enable us to influence change, and we're going to explore that some more. So yeah, you've really hit the nail on the head there, I think, in terms of why this is an important conversation and why it's important for us to take time to reflect on these things in our own personal life and also in a conversation like this, because it will make us think and then act differently. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Frida and then Catherine, and then I'm going to move on to the next question. But let's hear what Frida has to say.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I agree also with a lot of what's been said, but I'm thinking also change is not just the expansion, it's also the contraction. So it's more for me like the movement. So it can be both. And maybe the contraction can be to get my attention if I want to change in another direction. But I think it's both. So it's more, for me, it's more the movement, not only the
breathing.
Yeah.
Breathing is changing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Catherine.
Hi. I like to do it. I wrote it down to ask directly, and what it said, it was change is the coming together of different truths to create a new truth. This truth is the result of a clear new orientation towards the experience of a new possibility. And I think that's quite
it's very interesting, because one of the things that I notice is that change happens, for example, in me often because there's values that don't meet each other. It's like I have values that fight each other. And so I have to do something about that, because I can't live with that conflict. And that pushes me to change the way I am. So the first part of what you said really clicked in there. And then we look for, like, we have to find that new possibility. And I have this sense, at least at a human level, that this is very much the human story, that we have values that maybe have formed up to a certain point. And then as we learn and grow our awareness, we have new values, and then they start to fight with each other. We can talk about new energy and old energy. That's another way of looking at it. But that fight, it has to go somewhere. You can't just sit with that. Like, that conflict makes you look for something better. And that's a very powerful impulse in human life. And that makes change itself a very powerful impulse, because change then is about the search of life for new possibility, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. So, how can we respond to change? Change is happening all the time. Yes, there can be a strong impulse for change. when the change is external or appears to be external, we see a lot changing at the moment. We don't always understand what the energies are behind that. We don't know exactly, what the German parliament is doing and all the various politicians in there. We don't really know what they're thinking and what all the dynamics are. We don't know what the dynamics of American politics are, but we know bits, and things are more open than they have been in the past, I would say. So we're dealing with all kinds of things, and the same in us, there's change. We don't really know what the impulse is. Actually, we don't really know what the cause is, if it even makes sense to talk about a cause, but we are experiencing it, that's for sure. And for me, there are two things. One is we can respond to change, and we need to. And the other is we can look afterwards at how do we influence change, which is kind of like beyond the response. Like, how do we transmute that response into something powerful? We are talking about power when we talk about change, in my view. But let's first look at the response. And people have started to speak about that a little bit. So yes, how can we obviously we can respond in all kinds of really unhealthy and unhelpful ways. I don't think we need to explore that here. But how can we, in this time of very rapid change, respond to what's going on both inside ourselves, because we are affected by it, whether it's internal change or external change? How can we respond to it within ourselves and within our life context? Evelyn.
What I experience right now at the first is to be honest and be in my truth, whether it's responding to outer things that are happening and changing, and as well, very important, find my truth. And from that standpoint, from that being as honest on all different layers, whether it's mind or emotions or whatever else is in it, be calm and aware and stay in my truth, and then let my reaction unfold. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this feels very important, the word truth. And perhaps not only your truth. One of the things I find myself, people say to me, oh, did you hear what Trump did? Or did you hear what happens here or there? And my first response always is this even true, what I'm being told here? Mm-hmm. And how do we try to discern what's true as best we can? We'll never know, because there's no, everyone who sees an event will see it differently. But can we orientate ourselves around some notion of truth during change? This feels like a very, very important topic to me, because I think a lot of people are reacting to things that aren't even true. And that really confuses things. They don't know what's true for them, and they don't know what's true out in the world.
Yeah, but I can only say that the truth rises up from my inner truth, which maybe not on all layers in the outside be the affordable truth, but this is the starting point. When I'm truthfully honest, responsible for what my life, what makes my life loving and enjoyable and work. That is the first thing from where we can start out into all the other outer layers as well. Yeah.
And that's a very difficult thing to do, isn't it?
Yes, but we are together here to share that, and we are going to make it through it.
It's what we try very hard to do every day here. Yeah. Thank you. Cecile.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for inviting this conversation. Beautiful.
Nice to be back a little bit in this group as well. Yeah, for me, how to respond to change, obviously, is always a question about choices, and in the context of well-being also, finding that what Evelyn calls truth that corresponds to your personal needs and the needs of the people that are surrounding you. And that can be personal, like relationships, family and friends, but it can also be the bigger pictures of people that feel that there are like splits in the world at the moment. And in there find allies that want to bring the same kind of truth or the same kind of change into being. Because I do feel very strongly that on an individual level, if we are in the light that we can hold as a human being, there is some change that we can influence, but that will be in the third questions you want to ask today. But how to respond is clearly about making choices that correspond to well-being and taking care. For me, when we talk about values, it's all about taking care of self and others, informed by obviously necessities like food and a roof above your head, but also taking care of well-being, generally speaking, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, mental well-being. So yeah,
financial well-being and other kinds of
financial, all of that. Yes. And that's that's the bottom line. How to respond to change is choose. And that can be choose for organic food rather than non-organic food, choose for local rather than non-local, can be anything. But
some choices are very, I think, very challenging to make. Because we, you know, there are times in life where we have to make choices that, for example, in a really obvious example, if you're running a business, for example, and the cash flow is short and you have to get rid of somebody, fire somebody that you don't want to do. But it's an example, or you have to cut, you know, we have to cut budgets. This is very topical at the moment, cutting budgets because whole countries are massively in debt. And it means you have to make very tough decisions that are not like, they feel like they're not caring for other people. So I think this is where the whole thing about choice, which you're talking about here, Cecile, which is really talking about consciousness, isn't it?
It
becomes deep and engaged, because there's no obvious answer. Like local isn't necessarily better than global, but sometimes it is, but sometimes it might not be. There's no obvious answer, is there? And so we have to then really reflect, really ask questions.
Yeah, but I think here you're really pointing at something very important, because obviously if you are in a position where you need to fire people because you have to cut budgets, it's important that people that have that kind of power, as you say, change is also power. On what basis do they do that? Because, you know, in my experience, sometimes the bigger companies are in dire threat, but when they actually neglect the little ones that work with them, they might really lose it. If they stay true to the little people, between brackets, obviously, they might actually gain long term. And at the moment, what seems to be happening is that short term is leading. And I think the wisdom that is present in this room is also present in the long term consequences and awareness of what happens long term rather than short term. And there, I think, might be some choices to be made that are wanting some deeper conversations, obviously, but it's short term and long term combinations, and at the moment it's short term that is leading. I mean, that's what I'm observing.
It's so challenging, this actually, isn't it? Because there are, like, I actually really feel for anyone who's having to make decisions about budgets, for example, at a national level at the moment, because I know how desperately they're not just overstretched, they're, you know, virtually bankrupt. How do you make those decisions. How do you manage long-term and short-term in a crisis situation? This is a question many of us might have to face in coming years, where there is some form of crisis around. We've had it anyway we've had it a few years ago. How do we make decisions in these extremely challenging situations where we barely know, what really is the consequence of our decisions? I think there's a lot of that in the air at the moment. So it's great if we can look at short-term and long-term. One of the things I often think, Cecile, is like, I would never want myself or someone like me to be in charge of a country, because I don't run a strong enough financial system. And most of my clients don't. Like, we do have some wisdom in our community, but I would say if we were running the country would probably be broke. It would not, because people typically who are spiritually more conscious are not actually very good with money, mostly. So it's like, how do we get all these things? I'm talking about money, obviously, it's a topic that I think about a lot, but it's also very much in the news at the moment. How do we actually bring these things together? How do we bring consciousness together with financial discipline, together with care and well-being, together with all the other things that we care about as human beings? Now already we're beginning to get into important questions.
Yeah, if I just may, but it just really popped up as you were speaking, Sarah, is that the question to me is then, is anybody running the country? Aren't we not together running the country? Because at the moment, the country is not being run by anybody. The country is run by everybody. And in there, we have a choice. We are, most of us here present, most probably in a democratic country, and there are choices to be made. So it's not the whole terminology of somebody's running the country. I think for me, it's outdated. And that's where the power lays for decisions we can take individually. But yeah, it's financial flows as well. Back to basics. Financially, historically, has been created by human beings. So we also have the choice of dismantling the financial system as it is, and you're working on that, Sarah, obviously, to create something that enhances not just human well-being, but life well-being, generally speaking. That's the bigger question behind, I reckon, that's the change we're facing. Is the old world, the way we've constructed it since millions of years, millennia, not millions, but millennia of years, actually still functional in the way things are developing with IE and also the big challenges we're facing life on Earth, generally speaking.
Yes, and I think it's something I heard about recently, which was about disclosure around UFOs. It was just that somebody had run, a very, very good futurist had got a group together to run scenarios around disclosing more information about this. And they ran something like 50 different scenarios. And there were only 3, and only 3 of those scenarios was there a positive outcome. All the others led to disaster. Now, that's just one example, but I think what's most interesting at the moment, which is really what you were beginning to touch into, is the fact that maybe we are all going to be called to make decisions where we have to go really deep to make that decision. It really is not obvious. It's so easy to say, oh, they should do that, they should do that. But actually, what can we do? And how do we even think about it? I don't think that any of this is easy now. I think it's a very potent time, but
well, one more thing I will say, and then I'll stop talking. The question is, can we think about it? Or is there some other skill that we need? And that is, I'm not quite sure what it is yet. I wonder if our thinking capacity can still hold this, but it might be something.
For sure, I've learned over and over again that the mind is not capable of being a director.
Exactly.
And the navigation skills that we pay a lot of attention to in this community, I believe, are really important.
Absolutely.
Really, really important. Subtle navigation skills. Totally.
Yes, totally
Okay,
agree. Thanks, Sarah.
let's go to Patricia. So unmute yourself, Patricia. Yep.
Things start to get very challenging, no? The conversation is getting very challenging. I don't know if I'm going to say anything different. And maybe I was thinking in something at the beginning of the question, very naive, like, what can I, how can I respond to change? The words that pop up to me were awareness, consciousness, realizing when something is not going well. That is a signal for me to move on and think or get flexible about change. The other word that came to me is responsibility, accountability, like being, taking the power of the decision I take. And another word that came is education, being open and active to look for alternatives, other possibilities and things like that. It's true that the conversation, it got thicker, talking about the world and where are we going to. I have really no answers. It gets very confused for me. But something, while I was listening, something that I was feeling or I don't know, or was coming to me is like a faithful or a trust in if we are part of creation and of this expanding universe. There's a force bigger than our little minds and our little, because I think most people are taking action, thinking about the well-being of humanity, with more or less success, with more or less success. But we're moving from a place of wanting to be well. So maybe because when we think to the news, we get so negative, so worried about how the world is going, But something that I choose to do is getting out of that conversation and thinking, do you yourself the best you can every day, even though it has a little impact in the people you cross by, my kids, people on the street,
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's it for me, because I have no other big answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, there are people who say that we are really in a time of very great risk, I would say, for our human existence, especially for our existence as natural human beings, what I think of as a natural human being. There are people who say that within a very short space of time, there will be no natural human beings. Every human being will be chipped and will be being. So, I think this is, and this is part of creation, but that doesn't mean that we have, like, some people might choose that. Some people are already choosing that. But these are big questions because it changes our fundamental nature. So I think that's one of the reasons why this topic about change is so important. Is how do we do we respond to these pressures? We don't have to have the answers now, but I do think we need to be willing to be challenged around it.
See, and I think it's our nature, no, to be challenged around it, because we want and we search to feel right, to feel well all the time as humans, no? But you mentioned, I didn't understand quite the whole thing that you were saying about UFOs. I didn't catch up, but it called my attention also, because I think we're being open more and more to talk about that other possibility, extraterrestrials coming, or guided, how would you say, masters from other dimensions, things that most of us, at least me myself, I haven't really experienced, but nowadays I'm open to listen. In fact, we're listening to you, who wrote Money, Love Money, Money Loves You, and you explained it to us as something that happened to you, no? That they didn't came from your mind, no? It came from something that you don't know. We're being open to those things, mysterious now. They are some kind of mysterious, but for many people are starting to be realities, no? Realities.
We're being opened at a speed that would have been impossible to imagine 30 years ago. It's really quite remarkable. Yes, thank you, Patricia. Martin.
Yeah, as I heard the question, you know, how do you respond to change? What I heard was, it's to respond as change, and that it's like the idea we were talking about earlier. We were saying like this, we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. Little changes that's happening in us is happening in the universal or worldly. It's all part of the same thing, and it's like the idea that I feel like the idea of democracy is a high principle. The idea of politics is the highest idea of it is a high principle, but our expression of it now is a reflection of our powerlessness as humanity. We feel we need someone to make decisions for us, to do this, to do that. And the highest ideal is that we all have an equal vote and we all have equal value and we all have an input. But the current expression of it is there isn't really democracy. Voting, I feel, doesn't really make a difference. Politicians are selected, not elected. So if we respond as change, we can see also the technology. Like, we're using an amazing technology now to communicate all across the world. But the expansion of this technology is another reflection of the powerlessness that we feel as humanity, that this technology can take over us. And I feel like we have to, one way to look at it is we can respond as change to see that this expansion of AI and the technology is a reflection of our more and more dependency on these technologies. And they have gifts, but they also have big challenges that they can bring. And the powerlessness is like we feel as humanity that we are powerless in some way. And so the decisions that we make reflect in the political systems and all of the things that make decisions for us, that take away our autonomy and ability to choose. So if we begin to see that every choice that we are making does affect the whole, and every choice we make around technology or our power, our decisions are reflected in the whole, and the more of us, like in communities like this, make those decisions from a more empowered place, we will begin to see that reflected in the collective, I feel. But it's not easy. That's easy to say, very easy to say.
I think a lot of the things we're talking about here are easy to say. There are lots of nice words, responsibility, accountability, and being the change, and all of these things. Actually doing it easy when we're in an easy place, when pressure is put on you.
Yep.
Then that not always so easy, and it's time. It's clearly time. I mean, I can feel that very much. It's time for us to really grow up around this stuff and not be powerless like that. Because it's not just powerless, it's passive.
Yeah.
It's lazy, it's unconscious, selfish. There are many forms of behavior that go with that. Okay, well, you take care of me and you make decisions for me. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, thank you. These are all karmic patterns, by the way, Martin.
Right.
Laziness, selfishness. There are a few others in that category. Pettiness. They all harm other people. So what we call them karmic patterns. Sarah J, I've had to do a whole lot of work around some of these recently myself. Before, all my karma was around power and stuff, and now it's around, you know, it's around the victim kind of, you know, how you cause harm by actually not being responsible. Really interesting stuff. Sarah Jane.
Hello. So I've had my hand up for a while and the conversation's developed slightly. So I think what I'm going to say perhaps is something that is, you know, nice words, but it's what I'm feeling right now. And so when I think about responding to change, I think for me it comes back to control. And where are we making our choices from a place of trying to control the outcome? And it's a very simplistic approach, and I understand that. But I think as humans, what we all want on an individual level and on a collective level is certainty. And all of our choices, if we're unconscious, are coming from a place of us trying to predetermine the outcome. And I think that responding to change in a way where it is as much as possible from the heart and from a place of whatever happens outside of this, I understand that I have come from a place of integrity and consciousness and for the greater good, from my own personal perspective, which I understand is very, very subjective, depending on who you are and what you're trying to control. But yeah, I do really think that there's this piece here around being able to respond to change without trying to control what that change then determines. And I think of, again, in a simple way, you know, the movie Sliding Doors, where you make a decision and everything just changes. We can't possibly know what the outcomes are going to be, and us trying to plan and control and force and manipulate, because that's what we are doing, even if it is from a place of love. It doesn't work. We know this because there's too much else going on that we don't know about. And so, yeah, I just think when I try to make decisions or when I can feel a tightness, I know that it's because I'm trying to control the outcome. And I know that that is the very human part of me that is trying to stay regulated, that is trying to create, you know, a particular thing to happen. I want this person to love me, so I'm going to act in this way. You know, and it just really, really doesn't work like that. And so, yeah, I think I would ask myself, what am I trying to control?
And isn't it interesting, because we want freedom and we want certainty, and those two things just don't sit together, really, do they?
Yeah, I'm really in a huge space of change right now, and the resistance to it is, you know, it's very personal. It's not to do with the bigger picture, but I can just feel, all of my patterns, and I can feel that I'm trying to grow out of them, but my body's like feels so unsafe because I don't know what's going to happen.
All new, everything's new.
So
that's change.
Yeah,
that's
really,
absolutely,
yeah, really great.
New energy in, old energy out. Yeah. Well, I think that was actually, you know, bringing in the whole topic of control actually is really important in this conversation, because, you know, we can also look at people who, there's a lot of accusations of governments and other organizations controlling things these days, but there are a lot of little control freaks running around the world.
And it's that balance, like you said, about being passive. Like, we don't want to be passive, because actually then that makes the people that do have more power because of money and influence and whatever, it feels then like we're passing it over to them. And so, yeah, I'm aware of my, you know, where am I being lazy or sitting back or not wanting to make a decision on this, or where is it just that actually I'm just doing what I can, and that's as much as I can do.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to start to move the conversation towards the question of how did I write it? I think, how do we influence change? Okay, how do we influence change? Because we can. And we can influence it by being passive. Actually, we can influence it by being lazy or selfish, or we can influence it by being conscious, by making wiser decisions, you know, that all of these things. But let's look at the deeper underlying patterns around change and the human part in here. Some people have started to speak about it already. And let's see if we can really find that place inside you where you know who you are and how you are influencing everything. So, Margot, maybe I've thrown you off course by bringing in another question, but let's change.
Well, thank you. It's beautiful how the conversation has so many layers. And the second question is, how do you respond to change? And the third, you said, is how do we influence change? And I think the way we respond to change is automatically the influence. And how I personally working with it is to literally drop under the stories, under the labels, and to first of all really sense into grounding my energy really, really deep into the earth, so that I can stabilize the expansions, what are happening. And then you so beautifully just said, like, to really feel how we are. And when I use my mind to really fall into this subtle energy, and at the same time very powerful energy of who I am, with that focus, I keep going in the body and feel into the raw energy, what we would say, oh, I'm afraid, and then when I would think, oh, I'm afraid of, I stop and just drop in my body and really feel where do I feel this, and really go in as who I really am, and that's bigger than whatever. So how I respond to change, or how I respond to, like, almost literally everything that is happening in me, or what is happening outside of me, and what touches me, is I keep going in and land and work with the raw energy and leave the logic and the words and the stories as much as possible out of it. And then I feel that that is the true power to, like, land in every vibration. And there are many I skipped over, and now I'm landing in them. And sometimes it's incredibly big and huge and feels devastating. And there are also times that it's just really beautiful. So it's really a discovery of all the energies in me that are coming up to be felt as the power I am. And I feel that as the real truth. Oh, what's the real truth? The real truth of who we are, and to start feeling into the true power, that there is nothing we cannot experience. And then respond from there, if there is still a response needed into the outside world. And yes. I think doing that inner work, well, influences the change, that it's really happening, but really drop underneath all the stories and the logic and really feeling how does it vibrate.
And do you get the sense, do you get the feedback? Are you getting feedback that the world is changing as you do the inner work?
When I do the inner work, and it's like a constancy, I experience, oh, things are happening, you know, it's flowing, or that doesn't hurt me anymore as it used to. And then I'm like, there is a comfortableness, and then the next layer comes along, and then so it keeps deepening, and it keeps deepening, and it keeps expanding. So the question, how do I respond and influence, is really in here. I keep doing this, and then try to, well, stay here and speak from here. And it's a constant process I'm navigating.
And then the question, which is not really a question for you, but might come up with some other people, is, you know, when we want to influence things, there is something at some level that we, you know, there's a preferred direction, let's say. We have preferences. If we don't have any preferences, we just don't care, we're not really human. We can say, you know, at one level, there's no right, there's no wrong. But at the same time, we're here. You know, we talk about having free will. We talk about making choices. Choices are about expressing preferences. And we are all called to express preferences. Actually, in every single moment of every day, we are choosing, you know, I'm choosing to sit in this room. It means I can't sit in the other room, literally. I'm at this desk. I can't be out in the dark on the land. Like every choice we're making is actually excluding all other choices. And so our choices become very, very important, and especially during times of change. Let's go to Louise, see what she's got to say. Thank you, Margot.
Yes, hello, thank you, Sarah. I'm really just going to follow on from, I think it was Sarah and Margot and a few people in the chat. I feel within myself, especially over the last probably month, and especially in the last few days, where if I respond and influence myself and my surroundings and the questions that I have inside myself about those things that are in my environment, to do with work, family, things that I see on TV which aren't particularly pleasing, if I can work through my heart and the harmony that I find within my own being and in nature, it sounds rather woo-woo and out there and not particularly choiceful, but
yeah, out there. So
I believe as human beings, we have a unique power to be able to change things almost without doing anything. And within our and people are still, you know, they've been looking at it for years, but at the moment there's, and I've been today and a couple of days ago, I've sort of experimented with something called scalar waves. And this seems to be able to bring my fuller self, my expanded self, more to the front. And the things that I think I have to make a choice now, I have to do this right now, or things are going to go down a path that I am not going to like. And that tends to expand other possibilities around that small thinking that I have on one particular issue, or other issues that are actually around that issue, that make it a little bit, you know, bigger than Ben-Hur when it doesn't need to be. And I've found that these waves or biomagnetism, whatever that is, I'm just sort of learning and feeling into it at the moment. It's called EE system, and I'm really just experimenting with myself, which is what I like to do. You know, as a human being, we may as well do something like that. And so I've really just found that the worries, the concerns are so small that they take a back step, because the expansion of who I am and my heart and my left and right brain become harmonized.
Yeah.
So the decisions, the responses and the influences that I want to make on change, and I'll just, as I said before, just around my own environment and things that I see on the television, I'm really starting to feel my expansion into letting myself change the environment on an energetic frequency type of a way. And then
I think what you're talking about here is something very important, because you can start to do experiments. I have lots of clients who, for example, are in business meetings and they silently change the whole tone of the meeting, perhaps by coming into their heart or something, and some of the kinds of things you're talking about. There are many, as you say, that there are many very special abilities that human beings have, actually, if we cultivate that. And you see that, I see that more and more. People, they are literally influencing change in an environment that they operate. The more experiments we do, the more practice we get at doing that. Just, you know, maybe there's conflict in the room and you don't have to be the peacemaker, but you can, maybe there's a way that energetically you influence that situation. If you can do that in a room, essentially we can do that in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that groups like this, yeah, it's groups like this of people who just care about these things, who have the real power to make change at the moment. Every time I come across this, like people say, well, we should fight this, or they say the conscious people are not well enough organized, you know, the bad people are really well organized, which I think is true. But it's like, we don't want this just creates that. We actually need to do it a different way. I've reflected so much on this, and I feel like what you're talking about, especially when it's expanded by multiple people in very cohesive groups working together, that's something, you know, that can emerge, is way more powerful than anybody would realize. And it's, you know, it can be very low key, doesn't need to be noisy. Just get on with it and do it. So yeah, I think that's part of the potential here. Thank you, Louise. Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah, just speaking for myself, and just speaking in the to the company that I work for, the way I sort of influence change is when I have an idea that I want to implement, and I actually implement it and don't hold myself back, and I bring and I bring
energy into it.
yeah,
yeah.
And yeah, I bring some integrity and beauty to it, maybe. But
sometimes probably persistence.
Say again.
Sometimes probably persistence and patience. Sometimes there are things you want and other people don't want it for a while, or maybe quite a while. But if you know that it's important, you stick with it, you keep finding ways. I would imagine you do that.
Yeah, and it's the nice thing is that people ask me for things, and when I deliver them, it influences the business. So that's, yeah.
So, and what I am seeing is, I imagine that you have become much more powerful in that way over time. That there probably was a time when you held back a lot more. In fact, I think I even remember that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I feel that this is a very important example, because any of us, we all have times when we hold back. sometimes consciously and sometimes not even consciously. We don't realize what we're doing, but that just practicing standing for the change that you want to see and discovering how to influence it, because it's really a discovery process, isn't it? It's a huge, great experiment in a way. What's actually going to work? You don't know. You just have to have a go.
Yes, no, that's true. And the things that have sort of unlocked me have been shadow work, particularly with Kim Barter. That's the only stuff that's, I mean, you have helped me too, but the most influential thing I've found out there has been from Kim. Yeah.
I think some of the work,
sorry to plug, but
the stuff of the dealing with the darkness, dealing with the bits we don't want to look at, is unbelievably powerful if you actually want to be powerful. You're right. If you want to be powerful to influence change, you can't do it if you stay with love and light. It just doesn't work. You've actually got to look. You've got to look at that stuff that you don't love. That's where real power emerges. It's not that there isn't love and light there, but it's not obvious. And yeah, I think so. Anyone who really cares about this topic, it's going to be very, very important to be able to go into those deep, dark places. Thank you, Nick. We've got 2 hands left. We've got probably about enough time. Thank you. So Tone, let's go to you.
To influence change, I was thinking that you have to be mindful of how you spend your energy. And in that, I mean, what R.J. Spina says, an American author, he says that where your attention goes, your energy flows.
Yep.
And where your energy flows, it makes it grow.
Yep.
So be mindful of where you put your attention.
Well, let's look at that for a moment, because that's like what you've just said is really goes to the essence. Where your energy goes is what grows. What do you want to grow? And what do you not want to grow? If you think how much energy many people put into exactly what they don't want to grow, which is everything that's wrong with the world.
Exactly.
How do you put your energy towards what you want to grow? That really sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It's very important because so many people just do what you just said. They focus on what they don't want, you know.
Probably all of us to some extent.
To some extent, yeah. But it, it takes practice not to focus on it.
Yes, sit there, or what's wrong with me, or why is this? It's so easy. Like the things that feel wrong draw our attention so strongly. What's new and growing and emerging can be very fragile at times, but giving energy to it is what makes it grow. This is the art for me, is how do you grow something that's quiet and fragile, maybe because it's just young, it's like a seedling, when you've got trees and big plants all around. How do we nurture the little shoots of a better economy, a better society, a better social organization, a better family in amongst the noise of the established system? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That really goes, whether it's at home or whether it's in democracy, whether it's the world, whether it's all the different topics. How do we grow those seeds to become the strong new trees?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Exactly.
Let's go to Sue.
Thank you. And maybe it just adds on to that. I think probably also just being more pragmatic, or maybe I think I'm still that sense of, yes, the things we can do individually, but is there more we can do collectively? Is there more we can do to try and influence? I think history shows us that, places where the ruling class dominates is when they have a really strong policy of disinformation, of where truth becomes harder, where there is such a feed of lies, of conflicting information by the so-called governments, that that it's very hard to know truth. And in the end, people actually back off and become passive because you don't, it's easier. You're so disempowered, you don't have that. I think you're also talking about the power of AI. Is there ways we can use it for good? How do we start to feed into these mechanisms that are existing, but to try and make it more for the good? How do we start to build the consciousness, the awareness, the light, everything we're talking about personally, but how do we escalate that? How do we amplify that in a way that AI actually uses it for the good of the world and civilization, and balance that with what we're feeling as the untruths and all the rest? That's a yeah. Is there a simple answer to that?
That is
No.
the question, really, isn't it? It's not.
But how do we use that for our
Let's
benefit?
say we do the inner work. If we do the inner work, we have to do the outer work. That's what I found.
And
More
what
inner
does
work,
that outer
more
look
I need
like?
to do in the world.
Yeah. And I think what I want to know is, how do I do that outer work? I mean, I don't want to be a politician because I don't like their lives and I don't like the power and what that does. I don't, but how do we stand up in a public way? How do we stand up bigger than just ourselves in our life? Is this important? Is this what we should be doing? Or is it enough in ourselves? And I think this, for me, is a question, how do we amplify it? How do we amplify what we know is needed in a way that has a bigger impact?
Yeah, it's a very important question. We're obviously not going to have time to go there today, so it looks like we're going to.
Can we come together to talk about that again? Because this has been so valuable. Yeah.
Because I feel we need to talk about what we can do as communities. I'm over and over again, this thing comes to be about small circles, that it's small circles of connected people who have the power actually to create change that breaks through the current paradigm, which is built on a certain model of power, which we will never break that model. It's so good, it's so effective, it's so polished. I am just in awe in a way sometimes at the manifestation and energy mastery that is displayed in the world. But I know that that is not with love. Love is not a feature of it. So how do we, it's like, I hardly find words for it, but it's like there's a way where, on the one hand, withdrawing our power and our energy from systems, from behavior that is not conducive to human harmony and civilization. That's one thing I've had to learn, is how to just withdraw, stop giving energy to things and to people who behave in ways that are actually harmful to our civilization and our organizations, because we give a lot of energy to those on the whole. And then as we withdraw that energy and free it up, how do we both personally and collectively act together in a way that, once that power is withdrawn, it can't reestablish itself? It's like it dissolves in a way. It just can't coagulate into power that dominates. My sense very strongly is we can do this. We are doing it. It's important to do it. And yes, I guess I'm in some curiosity around this now, even organizing these events, which is different from what we've done before. I'm kind of putting my feelers out to see what we can do as a community in a way that we're perhaps not doing. We run courses which teach a lot of the skills that underlie this. What can we do and how do we do it? So thank you for raising that. I think that's a very good place to end, actually. Yes. And yes, of course, there are many practical things we can do, but I think there's a bigger question in here as well. And it's important, a very important one for the coming years. So we are bang on time. How amazing. Thank you very much simply for being here, for being curious. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to read all the chats out. But I think that lots of people will have read them, and thank you for participating in that way as well. Thank you for bringing your energy to such an important topic. And thank you. I'm going to make the assumption that you're going to go away and reflect on it some more. And your energy is going to be probably somewhat churned up by some things we've talked about and disrupted, and change is going to happen, because what are we doing this for if it's not for change? You know, I organize an event because I want to create change, not because I want everything to stay the same. That's what we're all about. We are all here to influence change. That's what we do as human beings all the time. So I feel that our job is to get very, very good at that. And there is a level which is so potent and so present and so available to us now, which wasn't before. And even in having this conversation, we're sort of saying, hey, we're interested. So something will emerge from that. I've got another conversation like this tomorrow, which I'm sure will evolve. I will share the recordings of both with all of you. So if you're interested, you can go and listen to the other conversation as well. And I'll then think about what we do next. So thank you and see you soon.
Thank
Okay,
you.
goodbye.